So I've hit record now. We can obviously, Michelle, take as much time as you want before you begin introducing, before you pretend the show has started in your head.
I'm pretending now. I'm taking my time. I'm doing the rhymes. Hello, it's Michelle Perez, joined two buddies down. We're down two buddies. It's just me and Jake. We are fending off the incoming hordes.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm sorry about my recent absence. There's something of a family emergency. I'm told that no one fucking dunked on me or talked about my penchant for droning on and ranting for long periods of time, oftentimes with dead air to the horror of my co-hosts. It's working on it. It is good to be back. I'm
Welcome
thankful.
Back, Michelle.
I'm thankful that my co-hosts did not shit talk me at length. Because I don't have a long memory. I don't hold grudges. Yeah. This is all.
And you don't need to listen to the episodes either, because we're honest and true people. I
listen to every episode, Jake. So I don't know what the fuck you're trying to say here, but you're not that nice, sir. See that? It's animosity. You have to, Jake. This is producer level shit. You have to keep the people wanting more.
I literally keep the show going when she doesn't show up. Last episode, for listeners, you will know this, and this is the thanks I get.
This is the tension. We need like some interviewer backstage, a la. Well, we watched Fuckboy Island recently. Wonderful program. What I wanted to start us off with. You know,
we'll say the show endorses Fuckboy Island.
Yeah. No,
we've both been watching it.
You know, this is not a paid sponsorship. I endorse the television program. About I don't know what the fuck it's about, honestly. They just look like people that have all been made in Skyrim mods. Try to not fuck each other, but fuck each other. And the interpersonal dynamics, they feel like written like wrestling characters. Do you get any of that vibe at all, Jake?
Oh yeah, it's much more akin to reality TV has always been somewhat akin to wrestling, right? But this is very much brazen in their disregard for maintaining any level of an actual reality show. They don't care. They're just making fun hot dudes do stuff.
Yeah, the guy that was literally doing like a fucking Nuremberg speech about lying about being a fuckboy was incredible. Like I have no part in this historical revisionist narrative. I was never a fuckboy. People can change. Today, we are joined by writer, artist, sort of jack of all trades in terms of a specific sort of online tastemaking I saw for a long time. Has written about comics for Fantagraphics, the Comics Journal, all kinds of outlets. Crazy prolific. And self-publishes her own works, stuff like Goro, Ophelia, Dysnomia, Hecate Snake Diaries, Volume 1. I got to ask you about that because... Christ. Was it you that worked on a comic or wrote about this? This is fucking with my head, where you and another person switched artist and writer duties page for page? Am I remembering that wrong?
I don't think I did anything like that. I know I've written for other artists before, but I haven't had very many people that I've drawn their scripts or anything.
Okay, I was about to say it. It also just seemed like something you would write about. You were you're very big into writing about sort of European comics at a certain point in time in Tumblr, where it kind of veered wildly between that, then your various manga creatives, and I don't know, your published work seems to kind of have a style or sensibility that sort of bounces those two philosophies together. I don't know, Jake. You've got your aortas with you. You're dual wielding them. Like, am I off base?
For the listeners at home, Michelle, you may have noticed, did not finish her introduction. Please welcome Sarah Horrocks to the show, everybody.
Sarah Horrocks. I'm doing great, folks.
We're getting back into
me.
the swing of things.
Yeah, no, the cobwebs are out.
No, I very much agree. I will say that Sarah, as far as you being a guest on our show, I was probably one of the first people to bring up your name, simply because I had around the time we had first started the show, which was roughly a year ago, I had gotten AORTA 1 and 2. And the reason I had gotten AORTA 1 and 2 were because I had been following you on Twitter for a while, mostly from kind of the types of, as Michelle was saying, the types of little, like almost micro criticisms you would do, or not even criticisms, just posting stuff you thought was cool. And I really appreciated sort of the breadth of what I was seeing there, where here was someone who clearly, the way I would describe it is sort of, you were someone who started to emphasize the way I described comics to people a lot, which was that if you like manga, if you like superheroes, if you like whatever, you just like comics. And on your account, I saw a very great embodiment of that, where you could scroll through all the stuff you were talking about, and it could be, Frank Miller's old Frank Miller stuff on one hand, and then some manga I've never heard of, like a couple posts down, that looks like absolutely phenomenal, and then right back into a bunch of other, either Western or European stuff. So just the breadth of that was, I don't know, what I really started to appreciate. And I guess how did you start getting into writing about that stuff in a way that was critical or expressive? Like, did you just want to start telling people what you thought was cool, basically?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the genesis of a lot of critics, is you just kind of have a kind of irrepressible reaction to something, and you want to share it with people because you don't feel like people are necessarily discussing the things that you're interested in. And that was definitely the case with me. A lot of the stuff that I was really into was not the stuff that people were sort of writing about. Even kind of to this day, there's a lot of stuff that I'm still, especially with European comics, I'm kind of one of the few people who has sort of written extensively about major European artists that the rest of the world cares about quite a great deal, but Western audiences just kind of ignore, except for artists, because obviously a lot of comics artists have very sort of wide reading tastes usually, but they're not the people who are necessarily writing criticism. Or the writers tend to be sort of, and I came from a similar vantage point because I was a English major who couldn't draw when I started writing comics criticism, and there's a definite, my very first stuff was very kind of how you would see it from anyone else, where I was writing about stories and themes and stuff of DC and Marvel arcs and stuff. But as I started learning, teaching myself how to draw, and looking at more and more comics, and sort of developing more of a kind of visual literacy and a sort of visual taste, the comics criticism kind of grew alongside that. And it also, I think, helped me learn how to draw, because I was I was consciously breaking down the things that I was looking at in a consistent manner. And so I could apply that to sort of my style and because I like one of the best ways to kind of learn how to draw is to kind of like draw things that you like. So, I'd write about the stuff that I liked, and I would kind of like redraw favorite panels or favorite illustrations or, screen grabs from anime or something like that I liked, and just kind of like improve that way and get better and better at kind of finding my own voice and kind of finding out what it is that I liked in all these separate things that resonated in me and kind of like influenced my own style and kind of spoke through my own sort of drawings. So I think it was just kind of like a process that was hand in hand with like becoming a better artist was becoming a better critic and vice versa.
Yeah, that's crazy the way you kind of talk about that arc. Like after a certain point, I think one's ability to sort of have an authorial voice, like, I'm not saying it's the same for everyone, but like for whatever reason, there always seems to be that tendency, like for people in comics where they're like, okay, I have X amount of things I love. How do I kind of take it outside of enthusiasm, or in your case, comics crit, and sort of, I don't know, put skin in the game. And it's kind of crazy seeing all of those influences. Like I have many tabs open, but basically I was looking at one particular old Tumblr thing where you are incredibly prolific in terms of article writing back then out of that Tumblr specifically, and it goes through, like, let's see here, gosh, everything from Albert. I'm gonna fuck up the pronunciation of all of these. Guido Krapix, correct?
Yeah, Alberto
Okay.
Breccia and
Breccia, Hiraoki Samura, just insane amount of essays, and then sort of swatches of all of these various works and interiors.
I think I still have like the only articles on Alberto Breccia like in English. Fantagraphics has just recently started to publish his work in English, and that's kind of led to a little bit more writing about them. But for a lot of that stuff, for at least a decade or whatever, I was the only person who had written about some of that stuff. So I made a lot of friends from like Argentina and stuff, because that's how they would encounter me, is because if they Googled Breccia, like my articles would come up. So it's really an interesting way to kind of connect with people with tastes from kind of all over the world.
Yeah, that's kind of the wild thing. It also sort of, I wonder if I'm looking at it with sort of rose-colored glasses, but I feel like there's a definitive absence of this sort of engagement with I guess the medium, talking over aesthetics, and like kind of critically walking people through the sort of headspace of the characters, and the sort of, I don't know, it's not necessarily like a close reading, but it's like your criticism,
long-form content.
Yeah, long form content, and
yeah,
something that basically isn't like, Jake. Just for a point of reference here, do you remember those old video game magazines?
Yeah, I mean, I was a EGM subscriber, like one of the last ones.
Yeah, basically this very thick, sort of tomb-like book, and yeah, the reviews were just basically sort of purchasing decision based reviews.
Well, and you were paying to get perspective. Even Wizard magazine, back in the day was a bit.
EGM was a little better. EGM was a little better.
Right, but that's what this style of writing is sort of, to me, this style of early, whatever you want to call it, early 2000s, more long form writing before Twitter and other social media obliterated anyone's care for that kind of stuff.
I just read those for the pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then, that was the only way you could kind of see screenshots and stuff of upcoming games and stuff. Was you had to actually go buy a video game magazine, which is crazy to think about.
I actually wrote the other day about, I distinctly remember the first time I had picked up a new copy of EGM, and it was covering stuff that I had already read about on the internet. And I was like, oh, buddy. Even as a teenager, I was like, this is okay. This is not old now. This is immediately old now. Yeah, exactly. It was a very, very weird time to grow up in. But
yeah. I look at, not to be mean and or shitty, but in the comics journals reviews, right now I'm looking at a review of yours it's on Peplum by Blutch, and you kind of
had a bit of an argument at the end of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty wild. Kind of. I guess the depth at which your reviews kind of touch on these themes while treating the work like a serious adult piece of work, and it's sort of very difficult, and it sort of seems like it's the exception, not the rule now. In as much as now it seems very much like a lot of reviews in comics, Jake. They kind of seem like they're soft selling the product in a certain way. It's really strange.
Well, I think that can apply to a number of different media criticisms, honestly. One thing that I think is really cool about Sarah's work and that she talked about briefly was that, you said you started learning to draw after you sort of started doing the criticism thing. That really resonated with me because I used to write about music, and the biggest thing I ran up against was that I was not a musician. I can keep time. I have a sense of rhythm, but I don't play an instrument on any level. And after a certain while, meeting so many people that actually did it and writing about it, I felt like at a certain point I was like, well, I can either keep doing this, and I would probably want to get further into actually understanding how playing an instrument works, or I'm just going to stop writing about music. And I did the latter. And it to me, you are someone who did the opposite, where I don't know how accurate this is, and maybe you can elaborate on it, but you started drawing because you felt like you had something to say after writing about comics for so much, I would presume.
I wouldn't explain it that way. I really only started drawing basically, I was writing scripts and stuff contemporaneously to any of the early criticism that I was doing.
I see.
But was having trouble because I, was, a poor trans woman in Rhode Island, having trouble paying any artists to draw them. So I started out making collage comics I'd cut up images and movie stills and stuff and make comics out of those. And eventually I was getting to the point where to make a hand in a certain way. I was cutting up all these images just to get the hand that I wanted. And so I was it would be better if I just learned how to draw a hand. And so I basically just became an artist because out of necessity for wanting to
hell yes
make what was in my head.
Right.
Yeah. See that.
I didn't even start learning how to draw until I was 28 or 29.
Oh wow.
And yeah, now I'm 30, just turned 39, so I've been doing it for about 10 years now. But yeah, so I got a late start on it.
Right.
But I think that worked in my favor because that's why I was able to my tastes and stuff, where I was able to kind of like guide my tastes a little bit more. I knew what I was trying to like accomplish, so I could kind of like look at things that I thought would sort of develop skills that I wanted to develop. Like if I thought that, oh, this artist does action in a way that I really like, and I like the way that their characters kind of move, so I should kind of study what they're doing and learn that for, you know, my own comics. And so, you know, that was more where it became kind of or was more sort of hand in hand. I think when I was initially writing comics criticism, it was just definitely just out of enthusiasm for the medium, but I was also, it was more focused on the writing side because I was only doing the writing side. So it may have been a similar process, but for writing, though, I mean, even for writing, none of my writing influences are really comics writers. Not really. Most of my writing influences were like writers and poets and stuff. But there were like obviously writers that I liked a lot, like growing up and stuff. Like I really liked like Frank Miller and Alan Moore and you know, that whole crew. But
was there a distinct moment where you were like, you know, where you kind of went from oh, I should draw a hand to like, oh, I definitely need to learn how to do all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first Cotty Snake Diaries thing was probably around a year after I had started learning how to draw or something. I want to say. Okay. And it was kind of, you know, once I got going, I kept wanting to get better and better, because like it was for the longest time. I mean, I just had to build up my like literal like ability to draw anything, let alone a comic. Right. And so I was at the time I was working as a night auditor at a hotel, and so you have a lot of time on your hands at night. So what I would do is I would work on like an illustration, drawing like a study or something at work for like 4 to 6 hours of the shift would be pretty much dead, so I could kind of just draw. And then I would come home and draw like another 4 hours and just do that like every day, and you know, slowly get better. And then eventually, once I got to where I was good enough that I felt like I could kind of make a comic, that's when I started trying to do comics. But because, I mean, I was starting at such a low level of drawing, even just like doing a comic was pretty beyond like my skills. I think I did a comic at work once that was like about like one of my friends as like a belligerent barfly / vampire. And I think that's probably somewhere, but it was just like very like stick figures and character faces type thing.
How long of a period is that for you when, you know, kind of working those nights and building up to the first go at a comic?
I don't know. It's hard to remember, because by this point a lot of that stuff kind of runs together.
If it's night shift, yeah, you're not going to have a coherent memory unless it was like an aha moment where you're like,
oh no, I know how.
That's when I discovered he had 3 feet.
Yeah, my coherent memories from working hotel night shifts are like usually like catastrophes, like the roof catching fire type of thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, or once a tire fell off a truck up like the hill and like rolled through the parking lot and came through our window where the orange juice machine was. And so I had to like clean up all that mess, and people were still coming in. There's like windows like busted, and trying to get orange juice out of the broken orange juice machine, and asking me like why it's not working. And I'm like, do you not see the like broken window behind there, and like how nothing's connected to anything? But yeah. And plus I was moving around quite a bit during that time, because I lived in Rhode Island for a little bit, and then I lived in Missouri, and then I lived in Florida, and then went back to like Massachusetts, and then I think when I moved back to Massachusetts, I think that's when I was working on Hikari Snake Diaries Volume 1, I think. So I was probably drawing that when I was in Florida, or I started drawing it when I was in Florida, and I finished it when I was in Massachusetts, which would have been, I don't even know when that was, probably
5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I was making those Hikari Snake Diary things pretty quickly. Probably the first one took. Actually, I think I did Dysnomia first before I did that stuff. Actually, or while I was doing it, the Modest Suspiria people like saw some of the shorts that I was posting, and they wanted me to like do a whole comic. So I may have done that like in between, and that dragged it out more. It's hard to remember the chronology on that stuff, but because that and the second one kind of bled together. But I remember I did the second one in a month, and that was like pretty intense. I was doing like 5, 6, or 7 pages a day or something crazy.
So this is all late night still.
Yeah.
So you're not. Yeah, no, she's not going to remember a one fucking thing about it, Jake. That's just. That's just late.
To be clear,
that's late night work.
My question was just, how long did it take to go from wanting to learn to draw to getting to a published comic?
Well, I would say I was probably working on. I was probably publishing. Well, it bleeds together because I was doing the collage comics before I started drawing. So
this is true.
I have pretty big. I have like a couple hundred pages of just collage comics from that time that I was doing as web comics.
Okay.
And
was this through Tumblr?
I was doing it through some web comic site that doesn't even exist anymore.
Oh, okay. Something like that. Gotcha.
That was the comic. I think Michelle may have seen it. Ophelia was the big collage web comic that I made.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Around that time, God, I was way more active on Tumblr. So yeah, no, that got some circulation.
That was the thing that got me sort of. That's where I was getting like a lot of positive feedback from people, and kind of developing. And then that was, let's see, that would have been. That was like when I came back from Rhode Island, because I remember I came back from Rhode Island to Missouri, and I was just like depressed and just like, fuck it, I don't care, I'm making a comic. And I was like, I can get a bootleg version of Photoshop, and I can have all these images that I've been saving up, and I can use these. And so I probably did that for maybe a year or two, and then moved to the drawing phase, which was probably a year where I was learning to draw, and I was still doing like, I did a couple like 1-page things because I was posting on Millar World, and they would have sort of various like art contests, or like sort of, we had this superhero fantasy league thing where you like drafted superheroes, and then like they like fought, and you like came up with the reasons of why your like superhero beat their superhero.
Hilarious.
And
wait, hold on. Was this with accompanying art assets?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there were a lot of artists and stuff on that board, and so people would draw different things or make stuff in Photoshop, and that, I think that's when I started like trying to draw like the characters on my team. Mm-hmm. And I think I also did like there was like a 1-page or something like comic that I drew back then as well. That was really pretty terrible.
This is funny. I literally did that in the past. Like Jake, you may know some of the artists, but there was a sort of air quotes artist battle thing. similar premise, but basically wouldn't be with existing IP superheroes or whatever. They would just make X character and then sort of do exchange through posts of art.
We did that for people's forum avatars.
Oh, wow.
On the forums that we were posted in. Yeah. It was like a forum battle, but the same medium where you would explain or draw some sort of concept of how you were.
Yeah, someone would do a script, and then someone would actually do the art, and I usually lucked out on that one. It's really weird. Literally everyone I know who has done that now is published in comics. It's fucking weird.
It's a good excuse to get you drawing. Like, I mean, the only way you can progress as an artist is just to sit down and you have to draw a lot.
Yeah.
And so anything that like raises your enthusiasm for doing that is pretty helpful.
Absolutely. Honestly, anything you like throw a little bit to a lot of time at, like there's this nice little, well, it's troubling, but there's like this happy middle between, you're an enthusiast, you love this, and it's also like the other side is the sunk cost fallacy, where you're just like, if I just wait a little longer, it'll be that much closer if I just never fucking do it. And
you at some point you just have to do it.
Yeah. Gosh, sorry.
I don't know if I don't remember the exact moment I would have thought like, okay, now I'm good enough to draw a comic type thing. But I mean, I must have had that moment.
I think that's a fantastic answer though, because it's just very realistic. I'm really just trying to ask from the perspective of the layman, so to speak, and it makes so much sense to hear it that way, honestly.
Well, yeah, because a lot of people mythologize writing, but writing is actually insanely easy. It's mainly like fucking driving the car correctly and like having something good that, if you actually want it to be good, is going to have to go through at least 2 to 3 iterations minimum to have it be coherent, to have a vision and a way moving forward. It is why people always do the meme of like writers / artists, where you like they do both, and God, I'm trying to remember the one where it's just like they're all dressed like fucking Fist of the North Star guys, like standing with their arms crossed.
Cartoonists are just the most powerful.
They're just where you have all the disciplines.
But they never really get respect for the writing side of it for some weird reason.
Right.
Well, yeah.
I think for me, at least, since I have written so much outside of my comics, that at least I kind of have some respect as a writer. But like a lot of people who are just doing the cartoonist thing, like it's not like they get nominated for best writer very often for like whatever the Eisners, which is kind of dumb because if it's good, it's good.
Exactly. I was thinking about the other day, because like I'm not, I don't know what the professional, where the lines get drawn, but they have a best cartoonist Eisner, and then they also have a best writer Eisner. And it's like, well, if we're all talking about comics, then like, where are you drawing the lines there? That's kind of weird, right? Like,
what's interesting to think about like Frank Miller in terms of, because I feel like at different times in his career, he was considered an artist, and other times he was considered a writer.
Totally. Because year one, also, right? Like,
oh, sorry.
I was just saying, like, that's a huge entry into a lot of Frank Miller stuff. Is, I don't know. To me, it was like I think the first thing I read was year one, which was not something he drew.
Well, Born Again as well.
No, exactly, yeah. And then you go into to the stuff that he does draw, and it does become more of about Frank Miller, the artist. I think one of the things that got me following you on Twitter a couple of years ago was you going back over Dark Knight Strikes Again, and just how radically weird and cool that book is, and how it kind of got a bad rap, over the years. Although I don't know where it sits now, I guess.
It's weird because it's kind of it's one of those things like that was just kind of like a forum meme, I think. Mm-hmm. And a lot of comics people, because they don't have like strong visual literacy just kind of accepted it as being that it's bad. But if you talk to like a lot of artists see that as kind of the visionary work that it is, especially the coloring. I mean, the coloring is still so far beyond what anybody is doing even now. And yeah, it's really an incredible piece of work to look at. And I think it's becoming more kind of cool to like it, but it's been an uphill battle. I think,
I think you've been a part of that, just to me personally, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, even like the early like image creators as well, it's kind of been an uphill battle to sort of reclaim them as like having made good comics, even though obviously like they were some of the most like successful artists in like history, and a lot of people like actually grew up like reading their comics and enjoying them. Like there was a period between like the late 90s to the, you know, through the 2000s where it was just kind of cool to say like those people, like those comics sucked and the people who made them, like their art wasn't very good.
Yeah, it's been so yeah, for me personally, I came up liking comics in that era on the internet and seeing the Captain America Liefeld meme posted over and over. And I've really enjoyed seeing like yours and other artists' perspective on all this stuff, because as someone who has never entered the art equation of comics but who's been reading comics my whole life, it's given me this like this more open-mindedness of like, you know, just judging things for my own and thinking if something looks cool, it's cool, and not having to go deeper than that in a lot of ways. And also just letting like the contrast to a lot of those early image artists is a lot of boring looking stuff. Especially these days. So when you go back and look at how weird and radical things used to be, I don't know, it's been I feel like very silly for being one of those people earlier in life on the message boards, kind of like making Liefeld jokes and being like that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think people nowadays, the problem is they just equate how close to reality something looks as that's whether it's good or bad art. And so they're not really, so we have a lot of comics that are kind of these like wooden actiony figure looking things, that we've lost a lot of sort of dynamism of comics, and dynamism is actually kind of what is actually popular with most people. When a comic like looks like a comic and is crazy like a comic, like that translates to a wider audience, I think, than something that looks like a still shot of like a movie that you can go watch.
I mean, I think what you just said can be actually seen in how popular manga is versus any Western comic in the States.
Yeah, like, exactly.
I think that's immediately what I thought of, is that dynamism is all in manga these days. And I was kind of curious, like, how did we get here in Western comics? Like, I remember being very angry at DC in the mid 2000s and really not liking a lot of the Jeff Johns stuff. But from an art perspective, is it really just sort of do you think it's like more of a reaction to the stuff that was happening on message boards at the time? Like, did we just stop wanting? Jim Lee drew Batman in like the early 2000s, but after that, it's been not a lot of similar stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I think I kind of blame what's his name? The guy who did the Ultimates.
Hitch.
Hitch, yeah. I think
that's actually a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Hitch, McNiven to some extent, like people like that, like what's his name? Lionel Yu. Like a lot of people, I think, for the longest time, like those people kind of, I think, grew up more looking at like maybe early Jim Lee or something like that.
Right.
But the people who were coming after like Hitch and everyone were just kind of took that into its sort of logical conclusion more and more. Because that was that Ultimates era stuff, was that sort of widescreen making comics look like a movie thing.
And it was kind of fresh at the time. I remember.
One of the stated goals of the Ultimate line was like, okay, if your only exposure to Marvel is the movies, so they're going to try to make something in step with those expectations.
Right, and these were we're talking like the early, like the pre-MCU movies, even.
Which they're basically the skeleton for if you give it enough time and kind of look at how everything progressed in progressed in the Ultimate Comics.
Well, and of course, like when the first Avengers movie, aren't almost all the Avengers movies basically Mark Millar comics?
I think a lot of them are
wow.
of Millar and Bendis stuff for sure. Yeah. All MCU is basically mining the last 2 decades of Marvel comics for like concepts and then reworking them into a more bland version of a movie.
The part of that cannibalizes the worst. Did either of you see Black Widow?
No.
I mean, it was on. I was doing other things. I wasn't paying full attention to it.
I'll see it eventually on when it's on a streaming service I have for like free or whatever. I might watch it. If
I'm not paying no money.
I don't think I've watched I haven't watched any Marvel movies. I haven't paid for any of them. I always just watch them like on a Netflix or Amazon or something like that when I'm like on a plane or something.
Yeah, I totally. Well, folks, just to clear the air, I completely legally watched this film and did not pirate it from a streaming website because you can't be charged with a crime unless you can't be charged with the crime if you stream it, but if you torrent it, you can be charged with distribution. So, folks, get a VPN.
I actually did parts of, I guess, was it Endgame? Was that the last one?
Mm-hmm.
Endgame's the last one. Yeah. The previous one was like
Infinity War 2.
Yes,
whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked some of the parts on there, and then some of the parts on maybe it's the last Thor movie.
Right. Yeah, the Taika Waititi one.
Yeah. But I definitely preferred. I recently read the John Romita Thor stuff, and those are really, really fucking good.
That's really cool. I've always wanted to go back to that, and also the Simonson Thor stuff.
Oh, have you ever seen the Romita Punisher stuff?
So
good.
John Romita. I think I've only seen some of the JR stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, never mind. Then the JR stuff. Yeah, the Punisher as a fucking Lego man is incredible. I absolutely love it. It's so good. It's so exaggerated.
Did you see?
I see it.
Romita Jr.'s I think it was coming out of Civil War. The World War Hulk. There's a fight between him and Iron Man in the Hulkbuster suit thing.
Oh my god, he just looks like Buzz Lightyear. Yeah. That fucking thing. I loved that shit.
Just like a cube, and he pile drives him through a whole building or something. Romita is really good. Romita Jr. is like really dynamic.
I have that issue. Yes.
I grew up looking at his Spider-Man like all the time, not even reading it, just looking at it, because he was the artist on that kind of when I was younger.
I read his run with Nocenti on Daredevil recently with the Typhoid Mary stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's so good. I love like that era of Romita Jr. where it was really like square and like very dynamic and like was like there's a punch in Goro that is very inspired by that experience because it's like he really is probably one of the best at like a punch that like takes it like it was like a spread. Like his characters are like just look like huge and iconic, and some of those spreads as they're like hitting each other, and it's like a spread like that, and it's like really amazing.
I'd be curious
they have
to
a
see
weird sort of mural
that Eternals movie. It doesn't look like they're trying to do anything with his designs, but that was one of the comics I remember reading was the Neil Gaiman Eternals book he did, where he was definitely kind of getting more into the developed square territory. But I loved the costumes he did for that book, honestly.
The trailer for that makes it look like they're trying to make like I don't even know. It looks kind of like a bland take on like Terrence Malick movies or something, which is really bizarre for a Marvel movie.
Yeah, I did not watch the other movie that woman made, but I get the impression that she's just yet another indie filmmaker that doesn't really read comic books that Marvel has hired to
one of my
I guess
friends,
just control, kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
One of my friends is like her and her boyfriend are like big time like communist like filmmaker people, and they watched her other movie and just like ripped it apart. I guess there's a lot of sort of upper class dilettantism in her sort of point of view in her films. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes across with something like Eternals.
It always feels to me like Marvel tries to find these exciting directors, but then they specifically find people that they know will know nothing about the characters that they're about to direct for, so that they can just kind of bring in their own people to dictate those terms, I guess.
And they'll also be given the terms, oh, hey, there's going to be 6 scenes in this movie you don't direct.
Right.
That's in previs. The work has been done. You're good.
It's such a weird pipeline they have now that honestly has made for like it's like novel to me that you can go back and watch the first Iron Man movie and think that was like something no one had seen before at the time. Yeah, really,
it was why I wanted to. It's why I wanted to talk about Black Widow for just a moment.
Sure.
I watched that movie, and the entirety of her background and sort of comic overtures that they make sort of goes to the wayside for all of the lines of dialogue for her from the first Avengers movie, and like the conflict, the past, all of the figures from the past, quite literally all revolve around it. And it's weird that like this is one of the movies they went out of their way to like, all right, we're coming back to theaters, and like it's got to be one of the most mid fucking films I've seen. In as much as like this is, they like went out of their way to publicly cancel Joss Whedon, right? And and her defining traits, right down to the point where they're lackadaisically making, I forcibly had my uterus removed, gags between one another, as though it's like a, so that just happened, aside you always hear in fucking Marvel. It's just like, yeah, yanked my uterus out, and then it hit me upside the head with it like we were in a pillow fight. Like, this is the shit they're basically saying. And it's like, who the fuck is this movie for? Who is it for? I think...
I mean, I think specifically, like...
They're going to be a victim of their own success.
I mean, to put that movie into context, like, it almost has nothing to do with the comic book character Black Widow, right? It's really just about giving Scarlett Johansson a solo film vehicle. And so, like, that's why... I don't know. That's where comic book movies really suck, in my opinion. Like,
I wonder to the extent that they may have like kind of sandbagged the film as a whole, because we know that like we saw that with the JLA movie, that they just will actively sabotage a multi-billion-dollar film just to like score points against each other and sort of inner company politics.
Yeah, it all makes the whole endeavor very, I don't know. Like, I really truly separate out anything comic book movies from what I actually love about comics. Like, that's just like a distinct line in my brain these days.
Though, I mean, I feel like the DC and Marvel stuff has almost replaced the DC and Marvel comics by this point. Because if you want to do something with superheroes with DC or Marvel, the best kind of experience right now is probably their movies, because their books are kind of just not doing anything, not even allowed to do anything anymore.
I mean, you're absolutely. I mean, that's like that. That's a very good point, to be honest, because they're like, like I can think of maybe 2 books that I actually follow that I would like. Oh yeah, I'll think of the story, and that's not many compared to how it was when I was growing up. And there's just kind of more of a dearth landscape in the literal comic book racks on the superhero front anyway. There's obviously a lot of good stuff.
There's also a lot in it where it's just like, because I think a year or so back, I was trying to like read whatever the popular superhero thing was and write about it. And it's just kind of, there's a style of storytelling that they are both stuck in where it's very like, like X, Y, and Z are going to happen at the beginning of a first issue, and at the end of the first issue of a new arc, there's going to be a villain on the last page that's like from like some obscure character, and it's very like by the numbers, and even like the types of scenes that they have in these comics, like there'll be like 4 or 5 pages of people kind of talking in a bar or something like that, and you're just like. Yeah. Whereas if you read like DC and Marvel comics, even like bad ones from the 80s or 90s, it's much more sort of dynamic, and much more of that stuff is done kind of on the run, and it's more sort of over the top. Even though there's more exposition in those comics, they're more sort of like purpley and more sort of like condensed and crazy and weird.
Yeah, it really is a stark difference from like just the vibe of what I grew up reading versus the so-called vibe that exists today.
I think it's very...
And I don't know if that's just natural because fans are running the house now, and that's sort of inevitable given that the medium is just grown at the rate that it's grown, and it lives in this Western world. But certainly this stuff, I don't know. It's just interesting to me that like there's clearly other models for comics out there, and I think you do a great job of talking about that. Was it like Fire Force that you were tweeting about or something as a manga?
Oh yeah, I love Fire Force.
Yeah, I would never would have known about that had it not been for your Twitter and just like the pages that you posted. But it's wild to me that we can have that. There's so much stuff that's, I don't know, like it goes back to what I said about how this stuff outsells in Western markets, and like
the funny thing about Fire Force is like it is so like beholden to old X-Men comics. Like so much of the powers and like names and everything are like, and character designs are like references to X-Men, and
that's really cool. Actually, that actually makes me want to check it out.
Yeah,
just because I love that cross-cultural influence as well, and like. Yeah, just the idea that, of course, manga artists would still read, like, Jim Lee X-Men and think it looks fucking dope.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, in as much as, I don't know, in terms of what sells now, and that, like, that specific drive, I don't... Like, are the Cape comics leading right now? Like, it's got to be a rough time to be into that.
I just know that there's a lot of, like, I would call it, not to just single him out as a writer, but Tom King-esque types of books that are successful, I suppose. There seems to be a big trend in also, like, just these mini-series that are about an older character that supposedly deconstruct things. I mean, you had that Rorschach comic. Good Lord. Like, I don't want to know about that at all. Like, I would talk about it, except I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
But that's the state. That's what I mean, Michelle. Like, I think that book is probably selling. Or, like, Three Jokers. Like, good Lord.
I think anything with
hold on, what
Batman...
is Three Jokers?
Three Jokers is what happens when you say some offhanded shit at a convention and they don't let you... They make you follow up on it. Like, that's how it feels to me. Like, it's like a comic based on a Wikia entry. Jeff Johns at one point, and I don't even remember in what comic, said, "Hey, maybe there was Three Jokers all along," and then they made him write a whole terrible comic about it, and it's very bad.
That's what's up.
I think that's the only way I can describe it. I remember paging through it and just laughing.
But yeah, in terms of like sales, I think anything with Batman in the title always does decently well. But I mean, the stuff that's like selling the most these days is like Raina Telgemeier YA comics, and then like manga. Like, it's not DC and Marvel necessarily.
Yeah,
YA seems to have basically been the thing. Apparently, those Scholastic book fairs or whatever were just like ridiculous in terms of
Couldn't get
sales.
comics at those when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. I bought Calvin and Hobbes comics from those things.
Ooh, good point, actually. I totally got, like, Foxtrot from those. That's a good one.
Yeah, I remember Foxtrot.
Yeah, Foxtrot's what's up. That comic made me a nerd, for sure.
I definitely have collections of Foxtrot around here somewhere.
That guy's a real one. The guy, he is such a nerd's nerd. Like, he's absolutely fun cartoonist, Bill Eamon.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I am not a big fan of the YA stuff. Like I
don't know anything about it. Like I see ads.
I'm aware of the
function. The ads for right.
If it's just like ostensibly children's books, then I'm just like, well, that's fine.
I know there's a ton of like teen Batman and teen Lois Lane type things, but that's all I know.
But I mean, when I was a teen, like I wanted to read like edgy, like adult stuff that was like more hardcore than anything.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
So I don't understand why. I feel like the people who read YA are not teens. It's actually like, milquetoast adults who want to
20 somethings.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are,
I guess.
Yeah. There's like, generally there's like maybe 3 types of adult YA readers. Like Floridians. There's people from Florida, like generally. There's Elizabeth Warren sort of style liberals, like the sign, like in this house, America is the land of the free. Love is love. You should be able to drink while driving.
Vote for Pete Buttigieg.
Vote for Pete Buttigieg, or else another.
It's like actual like kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Also that, yeah, like I would imagine those are more appealing to like an 11-year-old than a 15-year-old or something,
Yeah, which is not how it's like presented when people talk about it, because like when they talk about, they make it seem like it's being given to teenagers, but it's more for like kids.
Like the one analog I would have to that in my life is I was a huge fan of the Peter David and Todd Knock Young Justice comic. That was like actually a seminal work for me in terms of just getting me into DC. But that was also a comic ostensibly for young people that had like in like issue 12 or something really early in the run, there's like a school shooting issue where like one of the characters almost murders a guy that shot up her school because she's so mad about it. And it was such a dark, it's like a very... it doesn't shy away from reality as a kid's book, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's not overwrought or dark. It was like, I just remember reading that as a child and learning things about emotions. And like, I don't know if that happens in some of that more YA stuff.
Like teen me was watching like Evangelion and Ghost in the Shell and like Wicked City, and then like, reading like Cormac McCarthy and stuff like that. Like
exactly.
Yeah, sometimes a woman's face pops out of the vagina of a large naked Spider Woman.
Exactly.
Or in Cormac McCarthy's case, but you're all peeing in each other's hands on top of a mountain to make gunpowder.
I was probably 11 the first anime that I saw, which was just like flipping through the channels, and Sci-Fi Channel had Vampire Hunter D on, and I just saw like that part where that monster gets like cut in half like lengthwise.
Yeah,
I was like, what is this? This is not like the cartoons that I normally watch. And so that began my love affair with anime.
Oh yeah, I remember a friend in grade school describing Ninja Scroll to me, and they were like, it's a cartoon, but you won't believe what the fuck happens in this cartoon. And I was just like, what? And I was like very confused at it, but then like I would later like go to a fucking record store or something and see the DVD of Ninja Scroll and like have to look on the back of it and be like, oh my god, what is this? Like I
definitely have Ninja Scroll on VHS somewhere.
That's what's up. Yeah,
my
some
dad,
of that early anime really was like parents would buy it for their children, and then it would just expose them to the most radical violence.
They were unrated, and they were cartoons, so you just told your parents, oh, just a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter. And so I got to see all kinds of fucked up shit from like ages like 11 to 20 because you know, because everything else, like I wasn't allowed to watch like R-rated movies and stuff.
Oh yeah, right.
My whatever I read, and then like if it was a cartoon or whatever, then as long as it didn't have the R rating on it, then I was allowed to be into it. So all of like my interest in sort of more hardcore stuff came from like that. Had to be like satiated through that sort of stuff.
I can definitely relate. I remember negotiating like with my parents to get a Netflix, like an old Netflix account where they sent you DVDs, and I was like, yeah, I'll give you guys money every month, and you can put it on your card. And I like that was how, you know, once they signed off on that, I was just getting all the fucking anime and shit like that you could get. Like that's how I watched Ava, was on Netflix discs. But yeah, it had to be under that sort of umbrella of like, this isn't an R-rated movie, so it's whatever.
Yeah, that was a crazy time.
Yeah, no,
it's wild to think that doesn't quite. I mean, I'm sure, you know, if a kid out there wants to watch some cool fucked up stuff, there's a lot of ways for them to do it. But it certainly feels like, you know, it's a different world these days for those people.
Kids are much more monitored, and the internet is much more sort of sanitized now.
Yep.
Which is kind of unfortunate, because it's like, I feel like you need to like traumatize yourself as a kid a little bit with like art.
I don't know. I was about to say, I thought about this recently. It was observing people that were like circulating me and Remy's book. And this is like a super hyper specific, like, I don't know, sort of cult like group of, I don't know, like trans young people or something. Mm-hmm. And like,
you could say they're just fans of your book.
Yeah. They're like so specifically into a lot of weird, off-putting, depressing shit. And like, it's strange. It's strange to sort of see the way in which, I don't know, the specificity with which a lot of these people like things, I guess, if that makes sense.
I mean, I do think fan culture is very different now, if that's what you mean.
It's scarier now.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I like when I read some of the stuff some of these young people say, I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ, are you okay?
Like it's just a comic.
My concern's the other way. My concern is that, like, because I feel like teens today are a lot more sort of puritanical than they were 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I'd be more worried about like teens harassing me online or something because they didn't like something in my book, or versus like, you know, 30 years ago, you know, being actually into it and having like a kind of more of a culture around it.
I mean, this is only slightly related, but I think your presence on Twitter was something that really, like, I don't know, helped me reinforce ideas about just liking shit that you like. Like, you know, no cap, you were like a trans woman on Twitter that was like, hey, Frank Miller drawings fucking rule. And like, yeah, maybe he's a dumb shit sometimes, but like, we can just say that these drawings are dope and that he's a good cartoonist. And I was like, yes, that's correct. Like, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, you can say somebody is a piece of shit and that the art is good. Like,
yes.
There's not a contradiction there.
Right. And so, like, to see someone public, you know, who's in comics actually, like, just voicing that online was very reinforcing. And I think kind of helped me realize, like, that's kind of where I lie on it.
I get the... If there's a part of it that's missing, maybe it's like a tendency to not think of it in terms of an eliminationist narrative where you need X outcome to like reify an existing power that like may not actually fucking exist. Like recently with the Frank Miller stuff and the objections and Holy Terror specifically sort of being cited along with that. Hey, if there's someone I'm going to give some a group of people I'm going to give a little good faith on a subject, it's like Eddie Muslim living in the fucking world post 9/11. Jesus H Christ, that's got to be a rough one. That said, I think you can. I don't know. you can make your premises, and that is also sort of protected speech too. But I think we're also sort of learning there are limits to it, and now it's becoming very, very hard to not just be wiped off of the map and even payment processing and stuff. Like if you diverge from X narrative in a certain way, that's not a centrism argument. It's like it's getting wild across the board.
I mean, I think that only applies if you are not a like straight white guy. Because I mean, Frank Miller, for all of his like canceled or whatever, the same week that he was getting uninvited from Thought Bubble, he had a huge signing in California with like Jim Lee and all those people.
Right.
Like, and he's been obviously since Holy Terror, he's worked with DC extensively and he's gone to conventions. And so it's not like he's been making movies during that time. Like, it's not like he is capable of being canceled, or especially for. And then the other thing with that stuff too is that like the sort of anti-Muslim post 9/11 thing is something that a lot more people than Frank Miller have blood on their hands for. Oh, yes. And haven't remotely been held accountable for. I mean, George W. Bush is, friends with Ellen, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah, no, he's chilling with the Obamas.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying pin all your hopes and dreams in defeating Frank Miller, etc. God no.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, I think that like the people who are cancelable in this extent are like marginalized groups. So if you're not every group outside of straight white men, because your place within a community is often built upon the same community that is most likely to pull the chair out from underneath you.
A lot of the relationships are conditional. That's true.
Yeah, and much more important for us as compared to them, because like Frank Miller, you think about for like for Frank Miller or someone like that in comics to be canceled, like think about like how many people just like Frank Miller are running every single comics publisher and are, right. They've had beers with Frank Miller and they, are pals and, take pride, and or maybe they want to be able to use him for like a Hollywood connection or something like that. Whereas, if they're publishing a trans author or something like that, who they don't really know and aren't actually that comfortable with, and then they see the trans community itself, like, turn on that person, they're much more likely to stop working with them compared to
I've seen
someone who's like them.
I've quite literally seen it before in action. It's fucked up, and it's a regular thing.
Well, think of how often like people have been trying to cancel Gretchen on Twitter.
Oh man, no, me and Jake have been talking, and she's definitely someone we want to speak to in the near future because, I'll be honest.
We respect Gretchen on this show.
Yeah. I don't necessarily explicitly agree with each and every one of her takes, but like
same.
the critical lens at which it's sort of leveraged is of worth. And oh man, it's also just weird seeing the animus as some have portrayed it. Like, all right, posting a GIF is now like you're doing violence at me. It's like, right. It's a very base, low impulse to assign a 1-to-1 value to like an image of an act happening, and then that is a 1-to-1 with sexual assault, madam. How dare you?
Right.
And it's a very fucking weird. It's a fucking weird thing.
It is interesting to me that this like Sarah pointed out to begin with. This is all really a lot of times coming from younger people who are kind of the first whatever, what do you want to call it? Like the first generation that grew up under the internet where people knew what was happening. Like I consider, like I'm 30 and Michelle's a little older, and I consider to be like myself to be on the last line of remembering when there wasn't an internet, but being young enough that it almost didn't matter that much.
I remember.
Because by the time I was, let's say like 12 or 13, we were hooked up at my house and stuff, and then, but as we kind of all just discussed, like that was a time of the internet that was so incredibly different from what it is now. So these people that are 10 years younger or so, like, is that obviously this isn't all of them, and I think that gets one of the things I see in the Puritans discussion that I think is kind of a weird one that a lot of people get caught up on, is that yes, it's not everyone, but it's clearly happening to people. So like we can't pretend that they're just dumb teenagers all the time.
I kind of think about this one because the easy answer, Jake, would be
right.
Sort of saying,
stupid?
No. The simplest one would be like, you know what, you're absolutely correct, and like this impulse to have like sort of Hays Code thing is just that the way you think all teens are epic and cool and super more accepting, that's actually a bullshit notion. It's like, no.
Right.
The reality is that like this is a sort of cradle to schooling, social media awareness, and a sense of cultivated self that has grown in different conditions. It's not I'm not making an argument that the generations thing is real, but like the conditions specific to you and the time you came up. My nieces and nephews' relationship to apps and shit is completely different than mine. Right. And I'm like not even that old. I'm like turning 33 in a few weeks. Like the inherent difference is the hypervigilance they have and how connected they are and how they keep getting those feedback loops back and forth, like those cortisol spikes, as Eliza said. What's fucking wild is the impulse to anger they have is normal, and it's constantly sort of preyed upon and then commodified afterwards. But like they should all actually be like red hot piping fucking mad as shit about everything all the time, like for specific reasons, like specific material interests, but like it's never demands. It's always like angrily asking, and it's always in very like they're aware they're a commodity, and they feel like a lot of you can only not buy it or prevent someone from buying it. Like even deplatforming, a lot of those people's conception of that isn't like necessarily we're going to stop a Nazi from doing pogroms or whatever. It's just that like they just did the wrong messaging, and yes, still are admittedly bigoted people or whatever. But it's just like just the pathology is. It's been the only way I could sort of wrap my head around it. Like the impulse to be mad is good, but like
sure, it's being aimed at the wrong things, and this is kind of typical teen anger, is what you're getting at. It's like all teens get mad.
Yeah, but it's like fucking, and it leads to 20 and 30-year-olds with fucking animated program fucking tattoos, and like, being in your 30s for this or that Tumblr fandom thing for X cartoon. It's miserable. It's desolate. And like a lot of those people that work on those cartoons are incredibly talented. I don't think their output is bad. It's just like this specific type of consumer we have, like maybe the sort of most black-pilled of all consumers. Like, Sarah, have you ever seen Disney YouTube?
Oh, I'd be terrified. Because some of the worst things I've ever seen have been sort of American animators dealing with people mad at them, and they work on like kids shows or something, and it's like adults yelling at them because they screwed up their ship or something.
Oh wow, yeah, that's such a fucking nightmare for me. Like, I never want to be a part of that.
Yeah,
because I think it's kind of crazy because it's like the sort of hyper vigilance and everything only seems to work pointing left and down. Because at the same time, it's produced a sort of right wing that's realized that so long as it has no shame, it can't be canceled, basically. And so you get they can go farther and farther, and they know that antagonizing people is like fundraising, and so there's the whole political movement on the right now is just, own the libs, and it's basically about like antagonizing people like that in order to sort of raise your profile and get money and power. Whereas on the left, the experience of it is that stuff actually working to a degree.
Right.
Because you can, if you are dealing with like, marginalized creators, it is possible to really fuck up their lives pretty easily. Because a lot of the like streams of money aren't necessarily diversified, and they're also much more reliant upon the very same people who are most likely to sort of do that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's also just it's incredibly easy. It's just incredibly easy to do it, and then I think the worst one I saw was basically predicated on the person passing after a certain point in time. Like that was sort of the beginning and end of it. There was no sort of physical abuse or whatever named, but instead it was an uncomfortable no. And like that was it. And that was enough to like fucking ruin someone, which I think the impulses to sort of think of punitive financial terms is the problem, because I think if you have like any sort of successful thing, you sort of look to replicate the successes and then dial in that method of producing an outcome. For this, it's just also like, okay, so you've mapped it to sort of these sort of masthead beliefs you sort of hold and want to get across to people, and it's just like, oh, also you've sort of dialed in external forces watching how you know how to destroy someone fucking just like you, and that no one else is going to do it. Like when the internet we exist in clearly is defined by people just sort of repurposing successful processes and then leveraging it in the worst possible way against everyone at all times, just like a boot on your fucking head. It's like a C. It's like a C. It's terrible.
Well, and I think artists have to evolve a little bit in terms of how they respond to that stuff, because I think you almost have to have the idea of, come try and take this pen out of my hand, motherfuckers. Because I think that's because take someone like Gretchen, she could easily just like say this harassment's enough and I can't deal with this anymore, and just stop being online and stop kind of doing what she does, but instead she's like very defiant and continuing to kind of push what she wants to do. And I think that's kind of how you have to get, because I mean I've definitely heard from other artists before where they try and talk about how they're afraid to do this, that, or the other, and that's not something I really have ever related to, because I never think about the audience with my work. I always think about like what I want to see. I think of myself as the audience first. And So I think there's security in that to some degree, which isn't to mean like I want to be making like ignorant comics that are like hurting people that I don't intend for them to hurt. I definitely want to like think as much as I can about stuff. But there's a difference between that and the kind of fear that some people are starting to want to operate under and use that as an excuse for making sort of mediocre art. I think as an artist, you have to have a certain level of kind of diluted defiance. I mean, just to get to that point.
Yeah, just resilience is what I was thinking of, like the word I was thinking of.
I mean, there is a way through it. It's just like...
Well, you think about Contra. She's like was canceled years ago.
Oh,
and she's still just like YouTubing through it.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, to a certain extent, I think the dialing in process has existed so long that I think this isn't me shit talking Contra or whatever. This is like as a general statement, like as it relates to media, it is easy to sort of see the tennis ball go back and forth. Like if you see a comics review or sort of clickbaity title on Facebook, it's because they're farming for that specific outcome. Like X amount of comics fans said this about this woman, and they said she was a bitch. It's just like, wow, that's fucking news, man. Like this never happens every time a woman is on screen in a fucking American film. No, this is, you found it.
AKA like, it feels like 70 to 80% of like Bleeding Cool comment articles these days are just like finding random creators commenting on stuff. I get all these like alerts in my email about like how some tweet I've tweeted, in the middle of the night is being used in an article about like,
oh my God,
comic creators react to the Olympics or like some like social issue. And I'm just like, fortunately it's never led to anyone trying to, make an extensive YouTube video about how wrong I am or the right wing hasn't like ever like targeted me in that degree. But, I think also it's probably just because I'm pretty based general. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, I don't necessarily care about that sort of thing. So I don't really respond to it. And so like, I see that they've used my comments and that sort of thing. And it's just kind of interesting to me, but I'm not necessarily like concerned or anything. I think the one time I was concerned was, recently they wanted to use my, tweet about Frank Miller and, they, usually don't ask for permission. So I got like an email asking for permission to just use Frank Miller quote, and it didn't say which one. So I went and looked at what I said, and I had one that was like about, well, if people who hate Frank Miller should want him to go to Thought Bubble because, with the way COVID is right now and his age, it'll probably kill him.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
I didn't want that to be like, construed as me wishing like death on Frank Miller.
Right.
So I was like, no, you can't use that. I deleted the tweet before.
Could be, easily
it went anywhere else.
Right.
Because the thread within it that the tweet is within explains it, but out of context, I could see how someone might think that, and I wouldn't. I don't wish death on Frank Miller or very many people really. Most of the people that I reserve for that are like politicians and people who have actual power to like distort the world, not comics people.
Real harm.
Yeah. I'm like sitting here like tugging my collar anxiously like Rodney Dangerfield. Yeah, I don't know anything about any of this shit. That said, I think if there is a major overarching problem with like the internet in general, it's like the fandom mentality seeping into all ways of life. The political.
I hate it.
Cultural.
Very basic way to understand the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I feel like Harry Potter sorting houses. It's just Harry. It's quite literally mapping very broad baselines and saying, well, shit, man, I'm that type of consumer. Sometimes I like to play a video game while I watch a movie. And you just like find yourself saying this all the fucking time.
Yeah.
I had an aha
It's very
moment.
effective marketing.
I had an aha moment where I looked at my algorithmic data after a certain point in time and then my Spotify recommendations. And I started realizing slowly that the thing I talked about most before even owning a Spotify thing, where this is something the aggregate data could like be nailed down, was I talked a lot about Breaking Bad around the Occupy Wall Street era, and I actually talked to Aaron Paul via a phone thing they did and tweeted about it a lot, and he retweeted it. It was very fun. And like years later, a bunch of the songs in my Spotify playlist, despite knowing of no connectivity between third-party ad sellers and aggregate data sellers, and then it's like, oh, it turns out a bunch of those songs in that Spotify playlist are songs you've actually heard already. And a great deal of them are from Breaking Bad. And I was just in a K-hole the rest of the fucking day afterwards, like catatonic. Like, this is it. I haven't been having any new fucking experiences. I couldn't imagine being born into that by default.
You know how like
having it dialed in earlier.
The belief that phones are always listening to you, and that's how they serve up ads. And I think there's probably some truth to that because remote recording exists in a lot of these devices. But to be honest, like a lot of times the answer is way more banal, kind of like you were just saying, where it's like, no, they didn't listen to you. They just tracked your location and then cross-referenced that with like a recent Google search you had, and then pulled up like some sort of data near you about different stole. Yeah, and then you see an ad for those shoes you were thinking about. It's it's the mechanics of it are like not great because they're not even very controllable by humans to a certain degree.
I went out of my way to opt out of cookies logging and shit like that. So to have a whole generation of people like ostensibly being more surveilled willingly, openly, as long as a lot of these people have, it feels very strange.
Yeah, well, think about how hard it is to opt out of it. Even like think about like how you used to find new artists for music compared to like going onto Spotify and trying to find something that's not like recommended, and how difficult it is to like you have to find the search the artist, click the see more thing to go through the albums, then you have to, it's like a lot more steps than back even with like Napster, where you would just like download an album of some artist someone may have recommended on a message board and tried it out.
Or just MySpace. Like I found so many bands as a teenager because bands would have a MySpace page and then they would have their top 8 and it would all be bands that they liked. And so you could just click on any band that you liked and chances are you would get 8 recommendations for bands that they thought were cool. And then you could just go from there, like just clicking through and trying all the music that they had sampled on their site and stuff.
Yeah. Compare that to Spotify now, where it's like you basically type in a mood to get like a playlist for that mood, and so you're basically listening to like a curated music industry list of like what you should listen to for this mood.
Yep.
Compared to like making it yourself on Winamp or whatever.
It's the infection of marketing into that type of casual activity. Like you didn't used to have to. There was never an interest in. I mean, obviously radio exists and stuff, but yeah, it just wasn't an avenue through which that kind of influence could be employed. And I don't know, Spotify bums me out. I've never paid for Spotify. I'll put it that way.
Let me tell you something about Spotify, Jake. I went to listen to the new Lingua Ignota album today.
Yeah. Just do it on Bandcamp instead.
No. I went on to just look at it, and whenever you open a link for those fucking things now, it also has a link for the person's Cash App. Where it's like,
wow.
Yeah. Like if you go onto the Android app or your browser version of it right now, it's like
Spotify's you give them money, not us.
Yeah, no, it is incredibly dire.
Well, it's like YouTube now. YouTube, you have like your super chats and all that stuff.
Oh God, yeah. I don't know much about that. I know that's pretty popular in the VTuber world of like that's how I first heard of a super chat or whatever that means.
That VTuber world I am currently obsessed with, and I'm going to make a little VTuber and start streaming.
That's what's up. We actually saw that. Yeah, we did an episode on VTubers.
Really?
Like one of our early ones. Yeah, it's just us kind of just going over what we learned and what we know about it. And, it's pretty fun.
I'm addicted.
Basically, the way I had it explained to me by Ruben was that it's kind of like horse racing, all the way up to, sometimes a VTuber has to be, air quotes, graduated, which is, the racehorse equivalent of putting the white tent out and shooting the horse. But yeah, a lot of studio people in Japan doing like a corporate VTuber setup make about $30,000 a year, USD equivalent for being a VTuber, which is absolutely insane.
That's small potatoes compared to what Gargura is probably making.
Yeah. And there's also just the independent people too. That's one thing we examined, was like the line between the ones that come from a big company and the ones that are just people with a rig.
I think I'm actually kind of excited because I think it opens possibilities, especially for like trans women and trans artists and stuff. Because for me, one of the biggest impediments for streaming is I didn't want to have to like worry about my appearance constantly. And if I have like a VTuber icon, I can just kind of like, wake up and sit in my pajamas and draw on stream.
Yeah. No, it's
Whereas,
really...
Yeah, which is I think there's a very like gender divide there, because like if you're a woman, whether trans or cis, and you're trying to stream and you're using your face, like there's like a sort of baseline that you're expected to hit. Whereas if you're like male, you're just kind of allowed to look
like
however.
Fucking shit. You just look like shit.
It's so true. Yeah.
One of the most popular
streamers are so bad.
One of the most popular guys, I've had like 4 people I know from a Discord say he's like hot, and I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. He looks like Andrew WK, but like
I've seen
like
that
a
guy.
twink or something. But yeah, and I don't get it. Like this guy just gives off a very damp vibe. I'm not into it. Like,
well, I mean, look at the dynamics of the popularity in just normal streaming. Like all the top streamers are almost all male, and then for VTubers, it's reversed. Like most of the top ones are female, and I think there's something there in terms of like, and I mean, there are male VTubers and stuff that are like coming up, and I think it's just a matter of someone figuring out how to do it.
Right, what the hook is.
Yeah. But I'm interested to see, like, I think it kind of could be an interesting avenue for trans people in terms of like being able to do something without being like judged by how well you can conform or don't conform to like cisgender standards.
I follow a lot of fighting games content, and some of the best fighting game players, especially in the avenue of like what we call anime games, so that'd be like Guilty Gear or Melty Blood or something like that.
I can't wait to get the new Melty Blood.
It's going to be very, very good. I'm very excited for it. But yeah, some of the best Guilty Gear players in the world are trans women. Like Deb. Deb is the best, like almost definitively the best Soul player in Strive right now. And she is someone who competed, prior to transition as well, but is now out as a trans person and is fully converted to a VTube rig for streaming.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's like now she's a big breasted cow lady who's like the best soul in Guilty Gear and is like always beating people up. It's exactly what you were talking about. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I mean the tech doesn't seem too hard because it's pretty much just like
it's a webcam and a little thingy that tracks your. Yeah. Once I realized it was that, I realized just how accessible it was. Because when I first saw it, I assumed that they were wearing at least something. But that was just kind of that was just me not thinking of it in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, it can be expensive, obviously, if you're paying for the character and the rigging, but there's a bunch of YouTube tutorials and stuff you can teach yourself if you can draw at all.
Yeah, I actually saw your post about your thoughts on that. It's very cool to know that there might be a VTuber version of you in the future talking about comics or
I'm
even
working on
drawing.
it. Well, because
Nice.
my thing with comics criticism right now is that like I don't feel because I mean I don't read it,
Yeah.
so
No, no.
that I think the primary way that I would be interested in it is through a video where you can see like the pages and talk directly about the pages and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to do, besides like streaming like my process for like making comics, I want to do like kind of a comics show where I kind of like talk about different comics that I like and kind of being able to just sort of stand in front of and the images that I'm interested in talking about.
Totally.
I think that I think because there are some like cartoonists, K-fob or whatever and stuff that do versions of that, but I think I can do it better. So
I like,
I'm gonna try.
yeah, no, we like to hear that on this show because I have seen the kayfabe stuff, and I remember when they were early putting stuff out, my exact thought was, oh, this is clearly something that is cool and it has some use. I would watch other people do this.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Ed Piskor,
Right.
but
But it is
the
like
basic
that
idea.
Yes, that
seems
concept is appealing for sure.
And plus, I mean, we've seen with the frickin' Comicsgate people, like a lot of how their monetization stuff has come is because they rally around on YouTube.
Right.
So I think
that's
there's
a whole like closed.
I mean,
that I'm not even familiar with.
I would say it does seem like a lot of that has just went through a flattening. I think some algorithm some algorithms changed in as much as dudes that used to usually run 200K or so every month are now down to 60K. And I think it's just also
I think that's
exhaustion.
just the game
If
of
you
YouTube,
have to
though.
if you have to keep fucking ringing the culture war bell,
Right.
for the most part, it's not really a growth industry. They've got like maybe three top guys in that field. And like,
got to be exhausting.
well,
Yeah,
one,
it does.
yeah,
It
and just
sounds
one of them.
like
If
a
you
bad
think of how
existence.
much Tucker Carlson has to do, like for cable now, given that like cable and television in general is sort of going through a twilight phase, it's not going to be what it once was much longer. And it's been dying for a long time. Even late night numbers are sort of on a downward arc, where those were super dependable.
Think of how fast Newsmax grew just because of Trump being like, fuck Fox News, Newsmax.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, the right's always kind of been able to move like that, though, because I mean, it's just kind of talk radio like type of people.
Yeah, and
like to herd around different mediums.
Exactly, the same people are jumping from ship to ship.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, as long as it's like an engagement cycle, like a lot of people also sort of flip political tendencies. I think a lot of people aren't honest enough with themselves and just say that you're looking for an easy way out by calling someone a grifter. No, like I think in general, people can sort of flip on a dime just because they see where the winds are blowing, and also like there's a lot more agency and money conferred to you if you do hammer the culture war button, but you're like respectable in a general sense. Like it's very strange. It's sort of strange to legitimize folks doing that. Like,
well, do you remember when Cassandra Fairbanks was like a Bernie bro, Black Lives Matter protester, basically, and then,
like a Baked Alaska was a BLM guy. Tim
Long.
Is it
Long or something? I know you're talking about with the stupid.
No. I keep trying to say Tim Cook, but I'm thinking Tim Pool.
Yeah.
That's it.
Tim Apple, as we call him, was like an Occupy guy.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, the other thing is the most interesting tell of all of them is Pool specifically, he's a good bellwether for how this turns out. Poole was a stringer. Basically, you may not know of it like as a massively mainstream thing talked about at length, you the listener, but basically a stringer is someone that drives around in the middle of the fucking night or early in the morning, different quadrants of the day, but a lot of late night guys for television stories in the morning where there'll be a fire or an explosion. A lot of these guys work in LA and the West in general.
They're freelance cameramen.
They're freelance cameramen who have a going rate and sell to news stations and get into bidding wars against one another for news stations.
There's a movie about that, right?
Yes,
Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal.
Notably not the X-Men character.
Yeah, no. Awesome movie, by the way. Really like that movie. But yeah,
I liked it.
Like that impulse to like, I am the slimiest motherfucker on earth. I am going to watch you die. Like that's a job. That's an American job type. We could just do that. It's a thing we can do. And yeah, that's the world Tim Poole came from. So like that sort of thought process, you can extrapolate it across a lot of people that just come from culture war for culture war's sake, sort of set.
I mean, reporting on that kind of stuff is like a little bit like reporting on a car wreck.
It's an easy mold to pour into and fucking warp around when you need it to.
Right.
Because you never really upset people's expectations. So like you're always sort of working the crowd. And so like they can never be mad at you. Fucking Joe Rogan is incredible at what he does. I think the podcast sucks, but like I'm in the minority there. I get that. But fucking it is a specific discipline of just, never challenging your own audience to a certain point.
I think that's a good way to put it.
He's your POV character.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic. I first remember him from being the handyman at News Radio, and it's kind of funny that he's like the one character that wasn't on air is now a podcast host.
The culture war shit isn't the most surprising thing about Joe Rogan to me. I think it's like the muscle shit, like the muscle guy shit, the weird.
What, just becoming a UFC commentator?
Well, yeah, the meathead stuff, because like in News Radiohead, not a big guy. Kind of like a wiry guy. Yeah. And now
he just kind of became the fight talking guy, and then that guy became like a culture war guy.
Yeah, and he just he just looks like
Fear Factor. Fear Factor was somewhere in there.
Yeah, and
he
also
just looks
being
like toned fajita
the
meat
B
now.
team on the Man Show.
Yeah,
like they were the replacements for Corolla and Jimmy Kimmel, and
Joe
it didn't
Rogan
last. It like didn't last very long. Oh God. What a mess.
Right?
And Corolla became like right wing too, or something. I
think so.
Right?
Yeah, I think he's definitely.
He was always right wing.
Right. He's just doubled down on a lot of that stuff, especially in contrast to Kimmel being like the mainstream guy.
I bet Kimmel has like similar politics though, even though he like outwardly isn't like express them.
No, he's very much just a guy who's playing a face.
I'm writing that down on a notepad. If we ever get Jack on,
Leslie, Michelle knows
like,
some
hey,
people
Jack,
that have worked with Jimmy Kimmel.
I'll be like, Jack, is he racist? You can tell me. No one will hear that. Just tell me, you and me. Is he racist? Come on, buddy.
I mean, well,
just imagine my elbow like slowly going into his ribs.
Well, we're coming up on 2 hours. I did want to ask, or at least get into covering a little bit before we have to go, just AORTA, because it's your most recent work and because you just put out number 3. And I know you notably said you're going to do a little bit of work in between 3 and 4 on some other stuff too. But what a cool, I don't know, to me, what a cool comic as someone who came in just as a follower of yours on Twitter and was like, oh, this person, I like what this person says. I like the pages they've posted. I'm just going to buy this thing and see what's up. The format, for those listening, I mean, this book is published in, what's the measurements?
11 by 8.5, I think.
Yeah, like a very big, chunky magazine. type of printed artifact here. It gives it a lot of value, and then just I don't know. I like reading this comic because if I just page through it, I can see influences from like a page that where I'm just like, oh my god, this is like, like an Otomo page or something with the massive scale of an explosion. But at the same time, I'm reminded of like a Jack Kirby Fourth World spread or something like that. I would almost describe the comic, the vibe of the comic, and I don't know if this tracks to how you grew up, but this comic gives off the vibe of a well-edited Toonami interstitial. Just like cool action shit, and you can imagine some sick beat playing in the background because of the space. Maybe that's my own bias too, because I grew up on a lot of that stuff.
Hey, Gundam Wing was definitely...
Exactly.
Everyone loved Gundam Wing. I loved
right.
Gundam Wing.
So yeah, it's clear to me that this is like your idea of a mech book. Is there... obviously not just like, oh, what influenced you, but like, what got you wanting to make a mech book?
Jake?
Because whenever I watched like those kind of shows, what appealed to me is that it's basically like these people's like screaming their emotions across a like empty void through like this medium of machines, which I related to in terms of like transgender like body stuff. And I'd always kind of wanted to do a comic that kind of dealt with that sort of person inside of a body type thing, and then also like, I'm just really into any sort of like the Goro book I did before was like telenovelas and soap opera stuff. So I'm very into any sort of like genre where there's a lot of sort of heightened emotions, and like I can draw as many people sort of screaming and crying as possible. Because I feel like comics are the best medium for that kind of thing. And it just kind of like, activates your imagination as a reader more. I feel like a lot of Western comics right now are very emotionally static or very almost afraid to embarrass themselves with sort of loud emotions or big moments. Obviously not the case when you go back and read like, stuff from the 80s or like Stan Lee stuff even. Like,
right.
I think that's something that I enjoy with comics, is I enjoy like the sort of the moments of sort of heightened emotion and trying to say something like pure and true without, even if it may come out awkward or not perfect. Like I'm very drawn to that kind of thing. And the mech medium for me was a very sort of obvious thing for that. Because whenever I think of like mech anime, it's always like pilots like screaming philosophical arguments back and forth. It's very like, or like I sort of stand for this, and this is the type of world that I want to advocate for, basically. And and obviously like the big formative thing for me growing up was Evangelion. That probably is one of the most like formative works for me growing up at all. And all that is like these sort of psychological, like using the sort of genre of mechs to sort of deal with sort of psychological issues and sort of deeply sort of personal things.
Obviously it hasn't aged well, but my first sort of exposure to someone trying to articulate that to me in the snappiest way possible, again, hasn't aged well, was just like, yeah, imagine if all of the kids in the mechs were crackheads. It was like super excessive. Everyone had very fast back and forth rebounds, emotional states, very, very sort of manic, intense characterization.
Yeah, you have to almost watch it in a sort of macro sort of way. Because the characters are almost all sort of facets of a similar idea, or a similar like just sort of exploring different angles of a similar idea in terms of like trauma and depression and sort of generational conflict. And Yeah, and so like yeah, as a teen, like that, how could that not be like a formative thing? So
Absolutely.
much stuff, there's so many images from that just like stayed with me for my whole life, and the being able to do that with the genre and having, I think the thing I like a lot with the mech genre, and this is not just Evangelion, like Gundam, was kind of, I think, the one who really started this was the sort of crap, like kind of the trippy, like psychological stuff, like the new
Right.
types where like
The space age type of thing.
yeah, where like where they kind of you become so overpowered that you like break the bond. Your emotions become so overpowered that you break the bonds of the machine through which you're communicating in order to like better try and reach someone with what you're trying to say. Like for me, that's very, very sort of apt for like a post 2000s experience. And then so it's a lot of sort of crossovers with that, and then a lot of stuff that I can do in terms of like trans body stuff that I'm into, and all while making a comic where giant robots can punch each other, which
Yeah,
is I think at the end of the day you have to. I like to have stuff that's like kind of, I don't know, exciting to read, and like very like AORTA was very much like, I think especially the last two issues, which are basically like almost 200 pages, like it's just like a nonstop fight, which is I like and I relate to. I'm not as into like the sort of decompressed like Western superhero comic thing where there's a lot of not action and not fighting.
No, I think your use of space is just like, I mean, even in the first issue, there's a fight where there's like a double page spread that's like almost entirely devoid of space, and then the two robots, and that like you don't see stuff like that in a lot of Western books.
See, I like what I like to do is like compressing the character moments more with between those sort of things, because I think it almost becomes like a suggestion, or like a psychological suggestion or something like that, because that stuff feels almost like cut in there in between stuff in a way that kind of you absorb it instead of sitting there and actually like slowing down and like being in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
That's really well said.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I picked up on that in your comic, that there's clearly a bigger thing going on that you know about as the creator that you only let the reader in on a little bit.
Yeah. I always like that sensation as a reader, and also just like as an artist, I like having my stories feel like they're taking place in the middle of something. And I like, cause I always like that thing where it's like in a comic, cause I mean, when I grew up reading comics, we didn't have a comic shop in my town cause it was too small, but they sold like 6 packs of like random superhero comics at like Walmart or something.
Right.
And they wouldn't be necessarily like issue, 1, 2, 3, 4. It'd be like random ones. And so I always had to like imagine like what characters actually, the conclusions to stories and what characters were actually like, or I'd see a cool character in the background and have to kind of imagine like more of that story. And so I like that with my own comics, is like feeling like something is a part of something grander, or like seeing something and wanting to sort of imagine your own sort of lore, or you see like a character design in the background or like a minor character and you think that you can get like a part of their story and you want to get like so much more. And
That's
I think about like,
that's how DC felt to me growing up, because I would get comics just at the grocery store magazine rack, and it wasn't like I never got them like sequentially.
Well, remember back before we knew, I talked about this on Twitter the other day, but like back before we knew Wolverine's origin story, and it was just kind of like all we had to go on was the trippy Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X,
right?
And then like random nuggets kind of sprinkled in through the Claremont run. Like that's so much more exciting, and you're so much more engaged and interested in the character than when you finally got like an origin story that now I've blocked out of my mind.
It's so true. I remember because I was a teenager when that was a comic book that was like coming out and being marketed, and it was so like I remember paging through it and expecting to see something exciting, and really not understanding at the time, especially why a Wolverine origin comic was about some little like kid.
Like, it was so anticlimactic.
It just did it. It just literally was such a non-thing, like not like the opposite of exciting, anticlimactic.
Well, it's like the Star Wars prequels as well, because we thought, we're gonna get to Darth Vader. We're gonna find out about Darth Vader.
Oh, you're right.
The first one, Phantom Menace, is just
a kid.
Oh, but it's he's a kid.
It's a Patton Oswalt joke about that. Yeah.
No,
he's just some little
it's
kid.
Dead on.
It's so true.
Sometimes it's better to not know, even though you think you want to know.
Exactly, the mystery. Yeah, you don't need to know why there's 3 Jokers.
I'd watched Better Call Saul, and it's like all good, but it's weird that it just sort of try to redo the whole shtick of Breaking Bad, but with a different guy mapped to it, as opposed to just imagining each week Saul Goodman has a new piece of shit client.
Right.
Bing bong. It would be wonderful. We don't live in that world.
Right.
Everything has to connect and has to explain.
Yeah.
We need to know
It's got to tie into the other thing. You got to have the references that aren't like, it's gone from like what you said, Sarah, where it's like, there would be a reference in a comic, and I wouldn't know enough context. I would have to just kind of imagine, to where now the shows just spoon feed you that.
Well, it's like God forbid you watched God forbid you watched a Marvel movie out of order.
Right. Yeah. Just it's very easy for people to just, I don't know, like, there's not as much mystery is what I'm getting at, and that's partly the media, dispelling all of it.
Yeah, which is unfortunate for people who haven't gotten to experience as much of that, because I think it's really exciting to like want to know something and not know it and have to guess.
Absolutely.
And you do still see that in like, especially Japanese comics. Like you think about like One Piece and sort of Luffy's like backstory and stuff, and how for 30 years he's just been kind of slowly giving bits and pieces of that. I think that, and that's another comic where there's just going to be like, random characters on the side that are never going to get like a full story, but maybe like visually compelling or narratively compelling to you.
Yeah, I guess, you're right. Like that storytelling it's just all, man, the manga market's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
I know it has its own issues and stuff like that, but it's just, it's wild to me that you can pick up a phone book sized thing of Japan and just read comics of all sorts. That's always been.
Well, it's so weird that it's not more popular with like people who are doing comics these days. It's like if you go to like when you go to like SPX or something like that, like people there, what they're drawing from is more like Love and Rockets and like
Western
Chris
indie
Ware
stuff.
And as opposed, and I mean, there are some people, of course, who've read some manga, but it's not like Naruto or something, they
it has to be a sad person manga.
Yeah, it has to
or
be,
just like Junji Ito, honestly, like people, not that he's not good, but like that's an easy one.
Well, it's like all the stuff that like Ryan Holmberg translates pretty much is like what those people read, which are kind of like 70s Japanese art comic stuff.
Oh, okay.
Which exists later on, but those people wouldn't be caught dead like reading something from like Viz or something.
Right.
And it's just kind of unfortunate because there's so much stuff that can kind of like activate your brain and make you think about something in a different way, or storytelling and action, and make your comics more sort of dynamic and interesting.
You're never better at anything for being less exposed to stuff, you know? That's it's a weird way to think about it. So that's a good point.
I think that's part of like maintaining your hunger as an artist, because we've talked a lot about Frank Miller keeps coming up, but you think about like how someone like him has stayed hungry as an artist and evolved as an artist for so long, because he could have just stayed drawing how he drew like in the early 80s, or he could have like stopped at that like Mobius-y style that he did for Ronin, but he kept like wanting to try different things that he saw in other comics and wanting to, you know, keep doing this with his art and that and the other. And I have a lot of respect for that kind of thing, and I think that's about like being an excited participant in comics more so than just being an artist. Like once you get to the point where you're no longer like excited about comics, but you're still drawing them, I feel like that's when you're like dead as an artist. But if you can still kind of find the thing that makes you excited about comics and makes you want to like push yourself to do something better, I think that's kind of the spot you want to sit in and stay in for as long as possible.
Well,
absolutely.
That's a fantastic spot to wrap it up, in all honesty.
Yeah, I was about to say.
We want to give you the chance to plug anything, and obviously AORTA number 3 is out now, the latest in that series. But
where can the folks at home find you and find places to purchase your work?
Pretty much Mercurial Blonde on any sort of social media. I've managed to get that.
That's what's up.
I also have a website, squarespace.com/mercurialblonde. That has a link to everything, all my internet presence, all my stores, because I have a separate store for print versus digital. And then I also now have a separate store of an Etsy for international orders, because thanks, Brexit.
Oh, that's a good point. And we'll have links to all that in the show notes for people listening. Yeah.
But yeah, and AORTA 3 is the most recent thing that I have out right now. I'm working on getting up the VTuber stuff. Then I'm going to start working on my next comic, which is called BBB Chameleon,
nice.
4 Bs. It's going to be a full color kind of occult noir type comic, like in the vein of like Doomed Megalopolis, X 1999, like stuff like that. So like magic powers, destroying buildings, that sort of thing.
Dark cities.
Yes.
Nice.
All right. Sounds exciting.
So, that's me. That's where I'm at, and that's where I'm going.
Well, folks, we want to thank you for listening.
Jake has went.
I'm going to pass it to Michelle for the outro. What did you just say?
We're just going places, Jake. Everyone's going places.
Shark.
Like a shark. Like a shark in water.
We're smelling
I would have
blood.
opened with shark, but that's me. That said, it was wonderful having you on and talking about the process and what sort of informs how you come to the conclusions you do. For Jake, Sarah Horrocks here. I'm Michelle Perez. This has been Workinonit. We will retrieve Ruben and Eliza for the near future. They'll be back in Her Majesty's Secret Service. I'm so sorry.
Life goes on.
Fucking stop.
All right, I'm going to hit stop recording.